the $100 bills scattered across the marble floor like dead leaves. Clara Mitchell knelt in her stained uniform, hands trembling as she picked up each one, while 200 wealthy strangers watched in silence. The man standing above her laughed. "That's where you belong," Derek Ashford said. "On your knees." He didn't see her phone light up. He didn't see the message from a number she hadn't answered in 10 years. "I'm watching, little one. I'm coming." The most powerful man in New York was about to walk through that door, and he was coming for blood. Subscribe now and stay until the end to witness the satisfying. Comment below which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Clara Mitchell had been invisible for 10 years, and she had worked very hard to stay that way. She adjusted her apron in the narrow hallway behind the kitchen of Aurelius, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Her fingers moved automatically, smoothing wrinkles that weren't there, tucking a strand of brown hair behind her ear. At 32 years old, she had mastered the art of being overlooked. "Table 14 needs more bread," Marcus called from the pass. He was the head chef, a man made of stress and garlic. "Clara, you're up." "Got it." She grabbed the basket and pushed through the swinging doors into the dining room. The space glittered with crystal chandeliers and the soft glow of candlelight on white tablecloths. Every table held people worth more than she would earn in a lifetime, and every single one of them looked right through her. That was fine. That was the plan. Clara had been working at Aurelius for 3 years. She was good at her job, efficient, quiet, forgettable. The other servers complained about difficult customers, about being treated like furniture. Clara never complained. She had chosen this life precisely because no one would think to look for her here. No one would think to look for the granddaughter of Walter Kensington, serving bruschetta to hedge fund managers. She delivered the bread to table 14 with a practiced smile and turned back toward the kitchen. That's when she saw Megan Torres standing by the hostess podium, her face flushed with excitement. Megan was 29, beautiful in a sharp, hungry way, and she had made Clara's life miserable since day one. She was also the hostess, which meant she controlled table assignments. Clara always got the worst sections. The complainers, the non-tippers, the ones who snapped their fingers. Tonight, Megan was practically vibrating. "Clara!" Megan's voice carried across the room, too loud, too eager. "Come here, now!" Clara approached carefully. Megan only used that tone when something bad was about to happen. "What is it?" Megan's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Table 7, the private dining room. You're serving it tonight." Clara felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "That's Rebecca's section." Rebecca called in sick. Megan tilted her head, eyes glittering with malice. "And I'm assigning it to you." "Who's the reservation?" "Derek Ashford." Megan practically purred the name. "CEO of Ashford Tech Solutions. He's bringing his entire board of directors and some very important investors. It's a 12-person table, prefix menu, wine pairings, the whole thing." Clara recognized the name. Everyone in New York recognized the name. Derek Ashford was a 38-year-old tech prodigy who had built his company from nothing. Forbes had featured him twice. He was handsome, charming, and by all accounts, destined to be the next tech billionaire. He was also Megan's fiancé. "Megan," Clara said slowly, "if this is your fiancé's dinner, shouldn't you—" "I can't serve and host," Megan cut her off. "Besides, Derek specifically requested the best server, and I told him that was you." There it was, the trap. Clara understood immediately. Megan wanted her to fail. She wanted Clara to embarrass herself in front of Derek, to give Megan a reason to finally get her fired. 3 years of subtle sabotage, and Megan was going for the kill. "Fine," Clara said quietly. "I'll take the table." Megan's smile faltered for just a second. She had expected resistance. Then it returned, wider than before. "Perfect. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Don't mess this up." Clara walked to the private dining room to prepare. Her hands were steady as she arranged the place settings, but her mind was racing. She could quit. She could walk out right now, disappear again, start over somewhere else. But she was tired of running. 10 years ago, Clara Kensington had fled from her family's Fifth Avenue mansion with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart. Her parents had died in a car accident 6 months before, killed by a drunk driver on the Long Island Expressway. She had been 22 years old, drowning in grief and suffocating under the weight of her grandfather's expectations. "You're all I have left," Walter Kensington had said, gripping her hands in his study. "You must take your place in the company. You must carry on the family name." But Clara couldn't breathe in that world. The board meetings, the charity galas, the endless parade of people who wanted something from her. She had changed her name, moved to a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, and built a life that was small and quiet and entirely her own. Her grandfather had let her go. She had always wondered if that was love or abandonment. The private dining room filled quickly. Derek Ashford entered first, and Clara understood immediately why Megan had fallen for him. He was tall, with dark hair silvering at the temples, and the kind of confident stride that made people step aside. His suit probably cost more than Clara's monthly rent. His smile was practiced perfection. Behind him came 11 others, men and women in expensive clothes, clutching phones, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Clara recognized a few faces from business magazines. These were not small players. And at Derek's side, clinging to his arm like a designer accessory, was Megan. "Darling, this is Clara," Megan said sweetly, gesturing toward her. "She'll be taking care of you tonight." Derek barely glanced at Clara. "Fine. We'll start with the Chateau Margaux. Make sure it's the 2010, not the 2012. And I need sparkling water, room temperature, no ice. Did you get that?" "Yes, sir. Chateau Margaux, 2010. Sparkling water, room temperature, no ice." "Don't make me repeat myself." He had already turned away, pulling out a chair for a silver-haired woman Clara recognized as a venture capitalist. "Margaret, sit here. I want to hear about the Singapore deal." Clara retreated to the kitchen. Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to focus. Get through the night. That was all she had to do. The first hour went smoothly. Clara moved through the room like a ghost, refilling glasses, clearing plates, anticipating needs before they were spoken. She had learned long ago how to read a room, how to know when a guest's water was getting low before they reached for it. It was a skill her grandfather had taught her, actually. "Watch people," he used to say. "Really watch them. That's how you learn who they truly are." Derek Ashford, she learned quickly, was a man who needed to be the center of attention. Every conversation at the table flowed through him. When the CFO tried to make a joke, Derek talked over him. When the silver-haired venture capitalist, Margaret Chen, Clara now recalled, asked about the company's Asia expansion, Derek answered for 5 minutes straight, without letting anyone else speak. And when things didn't go exactly the way he wanted, his mask slipped. "This steak is overcooked." Clara had just set down his plate. The filet mignon looked perfect to her. Pink center, exactly as he had ordered. "I ordered medium rare," Derek said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "This is medium, at best." "I apologize, sir. I'll have the kitchen prepare a new one immediately." "You'll do more than apologize." Derek pushed the plate toward her, and it slid off the edge of the table. Clara caught it before it hit the ground, but the motion sent the sauce splashing onto her white sleeve. "You'll make sure it doesn't happen again." "Of course, sir." She took the plate back to the kitchen. Marcus looked at the steak and shook his head. "That's medium rare." Perfect medium rare. What's his problem? Just make another one, please. A little more rare this time. Clara, this is... Please, Marcus. He sighed and threw another steak on the grill. The second steak came back too. Still wrong, Derek announced, not even cutting into it. Are you people incompetent? I said medium rare. Clara kept her voice level. Sir, the chef has prepared it exactly to specification. Perhaps if you could cut into it. Are you arguing with me? Derek's eyes finally focused on her, really looked at her for the first time. What he saw clearly disgusted him. Who are you to tell me about my own steak? I wasn't trying to. Megan, Derek turned to his fiancée. Is this really the best server you have? She can't even get a simple order right. Megan's face was a study in false sympathy. I'm so sorry, darling. I thought she was competent. Clearly I was wrong. Clara felt the eyes of 12 wealthy strangers on her. She felt the familiar weight of judgment, the old instinct to make herself smaller, to apologize, to disappear. I'll get you a new steak, sir, she said quietly. You'll get me a new server, Derek snapped. I don't want to look at you for the rest of the night. Derek! Margaret Chen's voice was soft but firm. It's fine. Let the girl do her job. Derek's jaw tightened. He didn't like being corrected, especially not in front of people he was trying to impress. But Margaret Chen controlled $200 million in venture capital, so he forced a laugh. You're right, Margaret. I'm being too harsh. He waved a dismissive hand at Clara. Fine, stay. But if one more thing goes wrong... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Clara survived the next hour through sheer force of will. She moved mechanically, keeping her face neutral, her voice steady. Inside, she was counting the minutes until the night would be over. The dessert course was almost finished when it happened. Clara was reaching across the table to refill Margaret Chen's water glass when Megan stood up abruptly, bumping the table. The water pitcher in Clara's hand tilted, and a stream of ice-cold water splashed across the tablecloth and onto Derek Ashford's lap. Derek shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage. You stupid... He caught himself, glancing at his guests. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, but his eyes were murderous. You clumsy, incompetent idiot. I'm so sorry, sir. It was an accident. An accident? Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you something about accidents. Accidents are what happen when you hire people who don't belong in places like this. He grabbed a cloth napkin and dabbed at his pants, making a show of the inconvenience. The table had gone silent. Even Megan looked uncertain, like she hadn't expected her sabotage to escalate this far. Sir, I can get you... What you can get, Derek said, is out of my sight. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Clara watched as he extracted a handful of bills. Hundreds, she realized. He held them up so everyone could see. You want a tip? Derek's voice carried through the entire private dining room. Here's your tip. He threw the money at her. The bills scattered through the air, fluttering down like leaves in autumn. They landed on the floor, on the table, in the remains of the chocolate soufflé. Clara stood frozen. Pick it up, Derek said. That's probably more than you make in a month. Go ahead. Get on your knees and pick it up. Derek, Margaret Chen's voice was sharp now. That's enough. No, Margaret, it's not enough. Derek turned to address his investors, his board, his audience. You want to know why American business is failing? It's because we've lost standards. We tolerate mediocrity. We let people like this, he gestured at Clara with contempt, think they can occupy the same spaces as people like us. Clara looked at the money on the floor. She looked at Megan, who was watching with a satisfied smile. She looked at the 12 pairs of eyes, some embarrassed, some uncomfortable, none willing to intervene, and something inside her cracked, Not broke, cracked, like a shell that had been holding something in for 10 years. She knelt down. The room watched as Clara Mitchell, invisible waitress, got on her knees on the marble floor of Aurelius restaurant. She began picking up the $100 bills, one by one, her hands steady, her face expressionless. Derek laughed. "See? She knows her place." Clara didn't respond. She gathered the bills methodically, stacking them neatly. When she had collected all of them, she stood up slowly. "Thank you for the tip, sir," she said quietly. Then she walked out of the private dining room. In the hallway, away from the eyes of the guests, Clara leaned against the wall and pressed her hand to her chest. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was one she recognized. Manhattan, Upper East Side. The message was only 8 words. "I'm watching, little one. I'm coming for you." Clara stared at the screen, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Grandfather. After 10 years of silence, after 10 years of letting her live her anonymous life, Walter Kensington was coming. She didn't have time to process it. The door to the private dining room swung open, and Derek Ashford stepped into the hallway. Behind him, Clara could see Megan and a few of the board members watching. "Where do you think you're going?" Derek demanded. "My shift is over." "Your shift is over when I say it's over." He stepped closer, crowding her against the wall. "You embarrassed me in there. You ruined my dinner. You probably cost me a $50 million investment." "I spilled water. Your fiancé bumped the table." Derek's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "Megan bumped the table. I saw her do it. She's been trying to get me fired for 3 years. Ask anyone on the staff." The slap came so fast Clara didn't see it. Her head snapped to the side. Pain bloomed across her cheek. She tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. The hallway went silent. Derek stood there, his hand still raised, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him, Megan had gone pale. Even she hadn't expected this. "Derek?" one of the board members said uncertainly. "She fell," Derek said without turning around. "Clumsy girl slipped on the wet floor. Right, Clara?" Clara touched her face. Her cheek was already starting to swell. "Right?" Derek repeated, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Say it. Say you fell. And then you're going to walk out of here, and you're never going to come back. If I ever see your face again, if you ever breathe a word of this to anyone, I will destroy you. I will find out everything about you, where you live, where your family lives, and I will make your life a living hell." Clara looked at him, really looked at him. She saw a man who was small and afraid and so desperate for control that he had to beat it out of a waitress to feel powerful. She saw a bully who surrounded himself with people too weak or too invested to challenge him. And she saw, for the first time in 10 years, exactly why she had been hiding. Not from her grandfather's expectations, not from the Kensington name, from men like this, from a world that told her she had to be small to be safe. "No," Clara said. Derek blinked. "What?" "I didn't fall. You hit me. In front of witnesses." She looked past him at the small crowd gathered in the doorway. "You all saw it. He hit me." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. "You're fired," Derek said. His voice was shaking now. "You hear me? You're done. I'll have you blacklisted from every restaurant in this city. You'll never work again." "Actually," a voice said from the end of the hallway, "I don't think you'll be doing any of that." Everyone turned. The restaurant manager, David, was walking toward them. He was a thin, nervous man who usually avoided conflict at all costs. But tonight, he wasn't alone. Behind him were two police officers. "Mr. Ashford," David said, his voice trembling slightly, "these officers would like to speak with you about an incident report." Derek's face went white. "What incident? There was no—" "Sir," one of the officers said, stepping forward, "we've received multiple calls from guests in your dining room reporting a disturbance. We'd like to ask you a few questions." "This is ridiculous." Derek straightened his jacket, trying to regain control. "I'm a respected businessman. This woman is a disgruntled employee trying to—" "Sir, there's also a video." Derek stopped mid-sentence. "One of your guests," the officer continued, pulling out his phone, "recorded the incident and sent it to us, including the part where you threw money at this young woman and told her to get on her knees." Clara watched Derek's face cycle through emotions: rage, fear, calculation. He was trying to figure out who had betrayed him. Margaret Chen stepped out of the dining room. She was holding her phone, and she didn't look apologetic. "I built my career by investing in people with integrity," Margaret said quietly. "I don't invest in men who hit women." "Margaret, be reasonable. Our meeting is over, Derek. The Singapore deal is off." She looked at Clara, something like respect in her eyes. "Young lady, if you need a witness for anything, you have my card." She walked past Derek without another glance and headed for the exit. Derek stood in the hallway, surrounded by police and witnesses and the ruins of his careful plans. For a moment, Clara almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then her phone buzzed again. Another text from the same number. "That man put his hands on you. He will answer for it. Be ready, little one. The lion is coming to New York." Clara looked up from her phone. Through the window at the end of the hallway, she could see the city lights glittering against the dark sky. Her grandfather was coming, and Derek Ashford had no idea what he had just awakened. The police let Derek Ashford go with a warning that night. No charges filed. Not yet. The video was damning, but his lawyers arrived within the hour, smooth-talking men in expensive suits who made the incident sound like a misunderstanding. Clara watched from across the street as Derek climbed into a black SUV, his face tight with rage. She knew this wasn't over. Men like Derek didn't forget. They retaliated. Clara took the subway back to Brooklyn at 2 a.m. Her cheek had swollen to twice its normal size, purple and angry under the fluorescent lights of the train car. An old woman sitting across from her kept glancing over with concern, but said nothing. New Yorkers minded their own business. Her apartment was a studio on the 4th floor of a walk-up in Bushwick. 400 square feet of peeling paint and radiator heat. But it was hers. She had paid for every inch of it with her own money, earned through her own work. No Kensington Trust Fund, no family connections. She locked the door behind her and finally allowed herself to breathe. Then her phone rang. The number was the same one that had been texting her all night. Clara stared at it for 3 rings, 4, 5. Her thumb hovered over the decline button. She answered. "Hello, little bird." The voice hit her like a wave, deep, gravelly, weathered by 8 decades of life, but still sharp as a blade. She hadn't heard it in 10 years, but she would have recognized it anywhere. "Grandfather." "I saw what happened tonight." Walter Kensington's voice was controlled, but Clara could hear the fury underneath. "That man struck you." "How did you—" "I've always known where you are, Clara. I've always been watching. I respected your wish for privacy, but I never stopped protecting you." Clara sank onto her narrow bed, her legs suddenly weak. "You've been watching me for 10 years?" "From a distance. I have people who report to me. They tell me you're safe, You're healthy. You're surviving. He paused. But you're not living, little bird. You're hiding. I needed to find myself. Away from the family. Away from me. Walter's voice softened. I know. I understood. When your parents died, I pushed too hard. I was grieving too, and I handled it poorly. I tried to control you because I was terrified of losing you too. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. She had waited 10 years to hear those words. But tonight changes things, Walter continued. That man put his hands on my granddaughter. He humiliated you in front of his guests. He threw money at you like you were nothing. I can handle it, grandfather. I've been handling things on my own for... I know you can handle it. You're a Kensington. But you shouldn't have to. Not anymore. Walter took a breath. I'm dying, Clara. The words hung in the air like smoke. What? Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less. His voice remained steady, matter of fact. I've made my peace with it. But I won't make peace with dying while my only grandchild serves food to monsters and gets slapped in restaurant hallways. Clara couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. I'm coming to New York, Walter said. Tomorrow. I want to see you. I want to talk about your future. Our future. He paused. And I want to deal with Derek Ashford. Grandfather, you can't just... I can do whatever I want. I'm Walter Kensington. A hint of dark humor entered his voice. And I'm dying. What are they going to do? Kill me faster? Clara laughed despite herself. It came out broken, mixed with tears. One dinner, Walter said. That's all I'm asking. Meet me tomorrow evening. We'll talk. If you still want to stay hidden after that, I'll respect your decision. But give me one dinner, little bird. I've waited 10 years. Clara looked around her tiny apartment. The water-stained ceiling. The second-hand furniture. The life she had built brick by brick, trying to prove she could exist without the Kensington name. Okay, she whispered. One dinner. Thank you. Walter's voice cracked slightly, the first sign of emotion he had shown. I'll send a car at 7. And Clara? Yes? That man who hit you, Derek Ashford. I've already started looking into his company. The things I'm finding... Walter paused. Let's just say his problems are only beginning. The line went dead. Clara sat in the darkness of her apartment, holding her phone, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Her grandfather was dying. Her grandfather was coming. And somewhere in Manhattan, Derek Ashford was plotting his revenge, without any idea of the storm heading his way. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Clara's phone exploded with messages. The first was from David, the restaurant manager. I'm so sorry, but I have to let you go. Mr. Ashford is threatening to sue the restaurant if we keep you employed. Please understand, my hands are tied. The second was from her landlord. Clara, I received a call from a lawyer this morning asking questions about you. I didn't tell them anything, but I thought you should know. Is everything okay? The third was from Megan Torres, and it was only 2 words. You're finished. Clara stared at her phone, her swollen cheek throbbing. Derek was already making moves. He was trying to isolate her, to cut off her income and her housing, to make her vulnerable. He didn't know she had been vulnerable her whole life. He didn't know that vulnerability was what had made her strong. She showered, dressed in the nicest clothes she owned, a simple black dress she had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago, and waited for her grandfather's car. It arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. The driver was a mountain of a man named James, with a shaved head and the watchful eyes of someone who had seen combat. He opened the door for her without a word, and Clara climbed into the back of a Mercedes that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. They drove into Manhattan, crossing the bridge as the sun set over the skyline. Clara watched the city lights begin to flicker on, remembering all the time she had seen this view from the back of a limousine as a child. She had hated it then. The privilege, the isolation, the glass wall between her family and the rest of the world. Now, she wasn't sure what she felt. The car pulled up to a brownstone on the Upper East Side. It was elegant, understated, nothing like the ostentatious Kensington mansion she remembered. Clara realized with a start that she had never been here before. This must be her grandfather's private residence, separate from the family estate. James opened her door. "He's waiting for you in the study, Miss Kensington." Clara flinched at the name. She hadn't been called that in a decade. She walked up the stone steps and through the front door, where a housekeeper led her down a hallway lined with paintings she recognized from her childhood. At the end was a heavy oak door, slightly ajar. Clara pushed it open. Walter Kensington sat in a leather armchair by the fireplace. He looked older than she remembered, his white hair thinner, his frame more fragile. But his eyes were the same, steel gray, sharp as razors, missing nothing. "Little bird," he said softly, "you look just like your mother." Clara's composure shattered. She crossed the room in 3 steps and fell to her knees beside his chair, burying her face in his lap like she had done as a child. The sobs came without warning, 10 years of grief and loneliness and fear pouring out of her in waves. Walter stroked her hair with a trembling hand. "I know," he murmured. "I know, sweetheart. I'm here now. I'm here." They stayed like that for a long time. When Clara finally lifted her head, her face was streaked with tears, but she felt lighter than she had in years. Walter handed her a silk handkerchief, and she dabbed at her eyes, embarrassed by her breakdown. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize. Never apologize for feeling things." Walter leaned forward, studying her bruised cheek with cold fury. "He did this to you?" "Yes." "Then he will pay for it. I promise you that." Clara took a shaky breath. "Grandfather, I don't want revenge. I just want to move on with my life." "And you will. But moving on doesn't mean letting predators roam free." Walter reached for a folder on the side table. "I had my people dig into Derek Ashford's company overnight. What they found is illuminating." He handed her the folder. Clara opened it and began to read. The first page was a financial summary of Ashford Tech Solutions. Revenue, expenses, profit margins. Everything looked normal at first glance. "Keep reading," Walter said. The second page showed a series of wire transfers. Large sums moving from the company's main accounts to offshore entities in the Cayman Islands, then to shell corporations in Delaware, then disappearing entirely. "He's embezzling," Clara said, her mathematical mind immediately grasping the pattern. "These transfers are disguised as vendor payments, but the amounts are too round, too regular. He's siphoning money out of his own company." $12 million over the last 18 months, Walter confirmed. His board doesn't know. His investors don't know. He's been cooking the books to hide it. Clara flipped to the next page and froze. It was a photograph of Derek Ashford getting into a car with a woman. Not Megan Torres. Someone else. Blonde, beautiful, wearing a tailored suit. "Vanessa Blake," Walter said. "His CFO. They've been having an affair for 2 years. She's the one helping him hide the embezzlement." "Does Megan know?" "About the affair? I'm not sure. But she will soon enough." Clara closed the folder. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear this time. From something else entirely. "What are you going to do with this information?" Walter smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Nothing, unless you want me to. This is your decision, Clara. Your battle. I'm simply providing you with weapons.
You want me to destroy him?
I want you to have the option. Walter leaned back in his chair. 10 years ago, you ran away because you felt powerless. Because you thought the only way to be free was to disappear. But power isn't something to be feared, little bird. It's a tool. And right now, you have more power than Derek Ashford could ever dream of.
Clara stared at the folder in her lap. She thought about the money scattered on the restaurant floor. She thought about Derek's hand connecting with her face. She thought about Megan's satisfied smile and the silence of the board members who had watched and done nothing.
I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. You can. You're a Kensington. Walter reached out and took her hand. But you don't have to decide tonight. Come to one board meeting. Just observe. See what we do, how we operate. If you still want no part of it afterward, I'll respect that. One board meeting? Tomorrow morning, Kensington Capital. We're reviewing potential investments. Walter's eyes glinted. One of the companies on the agenda is Ashford Tech Solutions. They're desperate for Series C funding, and they've been courting us for months. Clara's breath caught. Derek doesn't know who you are to me. No one does. You disappeared before you ever entered society. Your face was never in the papers. To the world, Clara Mitchell is a waitress from Brooklyn, and Clara Kensington is a ghost. You want me to be there when he pitches his company to you. I want you to see who he really is when he's trying to impress people with money. Walter squeezed her hand. And I want him to see who you really are when the time is right. Clara thought about it. She thought about the version of herself that had knelt on that marble floor, gathering $100 bills while strangers watched. She thought about the woman she could become if she stopped hiding. Okay, she said. I'll come to the meeting. Walter's face broke into a genuine smile, the first one Clara had seen since she arrived. Thank you, little bird. You won't regret this. They had dinner together that night, just the two of them, in the small dining room of the brownstone. Walter told her about the company, about the deals they were pursuing, about the legacy he wanted to leave behind. Clara told him about her years in Brooklyn, about the jobs she'd worked, about the person she'd become when no one was watching. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. When Clara left at midnight, James drove her back to Brooklyn. She sat in the back of the Mercedes, watching the city lights stream past, holding the folder of evidence against Derek Ashford in her lap. She didn't know if she was ready to be Clara Kensington again, but she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that she was done being invisible. The Kensington Capital boardroom occupied the entire 47th floor of a glass tower in Midtown. Clara arrived at 8:30 in the morning, wearing a borrowed suit from her grandfather's housekeeper and carrying a leather portfolio she had never used. She felt like an imposter. You look like you belong here, Walter said when she entered his office. He was already seated at his desk, reviewing documents, looking more frail than he had the night before. Stop fidgeting. I'm not fidgeting. You're fidgeting internally, I can tell, he smiled. Sit in the back of the conference room. Don't speak unless spoken to. Just watch and learn. What exactly am I watching for? How people behave when they think they have power, and how they behave when they realize they don't. The board members arrived over the next half hour. They were a diverse group, men and women of various ages and backgrounds, united only by their sharp eyes and sharper minds. Clara recognized a few names from financial news. These were not people who suffered fools. She took a seat in the corner, trying to make herself small. Old habits. The meeting began with routine business. Quarterly reports, market analyses, pending acquisitions. Clara found herself drawn in despite her nerves. The discussions were intelligent, strategic, focused. This was nothing like the corporate theater she had witnessed at Aurelius, where executives performed for each other. This was real work. Then the agenda turned to new investment opportunities. "Next item," Walter said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Ashford Tech Solutions. They're seeking $50 million in Series C funding. Derek Ashford is waiting outside." Clara's heart stopped. "Shall I bring him in?" asked a young assistant near the door. "Yes, let's hear what he has to say." The door opened, and Derek Ashford walked in. He looked different in daylight, less polished, more desperate. His suit was expensive but slightly rumpled, as if he had slept in it. His smile was too wide, too eager. He scanned the room quickly, assessing threats and opportunities, and his gaze passed over Clara without a flicker of recognition. Why would he recognize her? She was nobody, a waitress. Furniture. "Mr. Kensington," Derek said, striving forward to shake Walter's hand.
"It's an honor to finally meet you. I've admired your work for years."
"Have you?" Walter's voice was neutral. "Please, sit. Tell us about your company." Derek launched into his pitch with practiced enthusiasm. He talked about innovation, disruption, market penetration. He threw around numbers, revenue projections, user growth, profit margins. He painted a picture of a company on the verge of explosive success, needing only a final injection of capital to achieve its destiny. Clara listened with half an ear, studying his body language instead. She noticed how he leaned forward when making big claims, how his hands moved constantly, how he avoided direct eye contact when discussing finances. He was lying. She could feel it. "Your numbers are impressive," Walter said when Derek finished, "but I have some concerns about your cash flow statements." Derek's smile flickered. "What concerns?" "There appear to be significant discrepancies between your reported vendor payments and your actual operational expenses. Would you care to explain?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Those are standard accounting variances," Derek said, his voice tightening. "Nothing unusual for a company of our scale." $12 million in variances over 18 months? Derek's face went pale. "I don't know where you're getting those numbers." "I have my sources." Walter leaned back in his chair. "I also have questions about your relationship with your CFO. Vanessa Blake, isn't it? She seems quite integral to your financial operations." "Vanessa is a valued member of my team." "I'm sure she is." The board members were watching the exchange with predatory interest. They smelled blood in the water. "Mr. Kensington," Derek said, forcing a laugh, "I assure you, there's nothing irregular about our finances."
"If you'd like, I can have my accounting team provide a full audit."
"That won't be necessary," Walter raised a hand. "My granddaughter has already reviewed your books." Derek blinked. "Your granddaughter?" "Yes, she has quite the eye for numbers. Studied mathematics at MIT before she decided to pursue other interests." Walter gestured toward the corner of the room. "Clara, would you like to share your analysis?" Every head in the room turned toward her. Clara stood slowly. Her legs felt like water, but she forced herself to walk to the front of the room, to stand where everyone could see her. Derek stared at her, confusion warring with recognition on his face. "Wait, I know you. You're the waitress?" Clara said. Her voice was steady now, stronger than she had expected. "Yes, I'm also Clara Kensington, Walter Kensington's granddaughter and sole heir to Kensington Capital." The silence in the room was absolute. Derek's mouth opened and closed several times before he found words. "That's impossible. You were working in a restaurant. You were serving my dinner." "I was. And you were throwing money at my feet and slapping me in hallways." Clara opened her portfolio. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here to explain why Kensington Capital will not be investing in your company." She pulled out a stack of documents and began laying them on the conference table. "These are your real financial statements, not the ones you submitted to potential investors, the ones you keep on a private server that you thought no one could access." Clara met Derek's eyes without flinching. "You've been embezzling from your own company, Mr. Ashford. $12 million funneled through shell corporations to offshore accounts. Your CFO helped you hide it. Your board doesn't know." Derek's face had gone from pale to gray. You can't prove—" "I can prove all of it. I have transaction records, account numbers, even email correspondence between you and Ms. Blake discussing how to manage the discrepancies." Clara smiled. It was her grandfather's smile. Cold, controlled, dangerous. "But here's the interesting part. I'm not going to turn this over to the SEC." Derek's eyes widened. "You're not?" "Not yet." Clara leaned forward. "First, I'm going to let you walk out of this room. I'm going to let you go back to your company, and your board, and your investors. And then I'm going to watch as everything you've built falls apart, piece by piece." "You can't do this. I'll sue you for defamation. You'll do nothing." Walter's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Because if you try to retaliate against my granddaughter in any way, I will personally ensure that these documents reach every financial regulator, every news outlet, and every investor you've ever spoken to. Your company will be worthless by the end of the week, and you'll be facing criminal charges by the end of the month." Derek looked around the room, desperate for an ally, finding none. The board members watched him with cold disdain. He was already dead to them, a liability, a fraud, a man stupid enough to pick a fight with the wrong family. "This isn't over," Derek said, his voice shaking with rage. "You think you can destroy me? I have connections. I have resources. You have nothing." Clara gathered her documents and placed them back in her portfolio. "You're broke, you're exposed, and you're alone. The only question now is how much more you want to lose before you accept it." She turned and walked back to her seat, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone in the room must hear it. But her face remained calm, composed, untouchable. Behind her, Derek Ashford stood frozen in the center of the room, watching his future collapse around him. "I think we're done here," Walter said pleasantly. "James, please escort Mr. Ashford out." The door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid. Clara didn't see Derek again for 3 months, but she heard about him constantly. The SEC investigation launched within weeks of the board meeting. Someone had anonymously provided them with detailed evidence of financial fraud at Ashford Tech Solutions. Derek denied everything, hired expensive lawyers, went on television to proclaim his innocence. None of it mattered. The documents were irrefutable. His investors pulled out. His board demanded his resignation. His stock price crashed so hard that trading was suspended. And then Megan Torres went public with the affair. Clara watched the interview on her laptop, sitting in her grandfather's brownstone, where she had been staying since the restaurant fired her. Megan sat on a morning show couch, mascara carefully smudged, telling the sympathetic hosts about her devastating betrayal. "I had no idea," Megan said, dabbing at her eyes. "Derek and Vanessa were carrying on right under my nose. I feel like such a fool." Clara almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What Megan didn't mention was that she had contacted Clara 2 days after the board meeting, offering to provide evidence of Derek's offshore accounts in exchange for being protected when the investigation began. She had kept meticulous records of Derek's secrets, planning to use them as leverage for a larger settlement if they ever divorced. Clara had accepted the deal. Now Megan was positioning herself as a victim, building sympathy for her inevitable tell-all book deal. Clara didn't care. The woman had made her life miserable for 3 years, but in the end, she had proven useful. That was the thing about power, Clara was learning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about leverage. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandfather. "Turn on Channel 4. Now." Clara switched channels. A breaking news banner scrolled across the screen. Tech CEO Derek Ashford arrested on federal charges. The footage showed Derek being led out of his apartment building in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. He looked small, diminished. Nothing like the man who had thrown money at her feet and told her she knew her place. Clara watched until they put him in the back of a police car and drove away. Then she turned off the television and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. 3 months ago, she had been invisible. A waitress. A nobody. Now she was something else entirely. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a calendar reminder. Kensington Capital Board meeting. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Agenda. Clara Kensington's appointment as Executive Vice President. She stared at the notification for a long moment. Then she smiled. 6 months had passed since Derek Ashford's arrest, and Clara Kensington had become someone she barely recognized. She stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment, a sleek 2-bedroom on the Upper West Side that her grandfather had insisted she accept, adjusting the collar of her silk blouse. The woman staring back at her had sharp cheekbones, confident eyes, and the kind of posture that made people step aside in hallways. Gone was the hunched waitress who flinched at loud voices. "You're going to be late," Walter called from the living room. He was visiting for tea, something they did twice a week now. His health was declining faster than the doctors had predicted, but he refused to slow down. "I'm coming." Clara grabbed her portfolio and walked out to join him. Walter sat in his wheelchair now. He had stopped pretending the cane was enough 2 months ago. But his eyes were still sharp, still assessing everything. "The charity gala tonight," he said. "Are you ready?" "I've been to a dozen events in the last 3 months, Grandfather. I think I can handle another one." "This one is different." Walter's voice was grave. "The Metropolitan Museum, 500 guests. Every major player in New York finance will be there." "I know the guest list." "Then you know Derek Ashford was released on bail last week." Clara's hand froze on her portfolio. "What?" "His lawyers finally convinced a judge he wasn't a flight risk. He's been under house arrest, but the gala's charity board granted him special permission to attend." Walter watched her carefully. "They're old money. They don't like scandal, but they like abandoning their own even less." Clara felt her heart rate spike. She hadn't seen Derek since that day in the boardroom, when she had watched his world crumble around him. She had followed the news, the indictment, the hearings, the endless legal maneuvering, but she had kept her distance. Now he would be in the same room as her. "I can skip the gala," she said. "It's not that important." "It's extremely important. You're being announced as the new Executive Vice President of Kensington Capital tonight. The press will be there. The board will be there." Walter leaned forward. "If you hide now, you hand him a victory." "I'm not hiding. I'm being strategic." "You're being afraid." Walter's voice softened. "And that's understandable. But Clara, you've spent your whole life running from things that frightened you. Your parents' death. The family legacy. Me." He reached out and took her hand. "Tonight, I need you to stand still." Clara looked at her grandfather. This dying man who had waited 10 years for her to come home. She thought about the girl who had knelt on a marble floor, picking up scattered bills while strangers watched. That girl was gone. "Fine," she said. "I'll go." Walter smiled. "Good. And wear the blue dress, the one I had sent over last week." "You planned this." "I always plan everything."
He squeezed her hand. That's how Kensingtons survive. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed for the evening. Clara arrived at 8 o'clock, stepping out of the black town car into a storm of camera flashes. She had learned to navigate red carpets over the last few months. Chin up, smile neutral, keep moving. The blue dress her grandfather had chosen was perfect. Elegant without being ostentatious, powerful without being aggressive. It made her look like exactly what she was, someone who belonged. Inside, the main hall was packed with New York's elite. Clara recognized faces from magazine covers, from boardrooms, from the financial news she now consumed every morning. 6 months ago, these people had looked right through her. Now, they sought her out. Clara Kensington, a silver-haired woman approached with an extended hand. I'm Margaret Chen. We met briefly at your grandfather's office. Clara remembered her, the venture capitalist who had recorded Derek's behavior at Aurelius and called the police. The only person at that dinner who had shown any decency. Miss Chen, thank you for coming tonight. Please, call me Margaret. She smiled warmly. I've been following your work at Kensington Capital. The restructuring of the Chen Walters Fund was impressive. Your grandfather must be proud. He has high standards. He also has excellent judgment. Margaret lowered her voice. I assume you know Derek Ashford is here? Clara's stomach tightened. I heard. He's been telling everyone who will listen that you and your grandfather orchestrated his downfall. That you planted evidence, manipulated witnesses, destroyed an innocent man. Margaret's eyes hardened. Most people don't believe him, but some do. Let them believe what they want. That's the right attitude. But be careful tonight. He's desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. Clara nodded, filing away the warning. She excused herself and moved deeper into the crowd, accepting champagne from a passing waiter, making small talk with board members and investors. This was her life now, an endless performance of confidence and competence. She was discussing Asian market expansion with a hedge fund manager when she felt eyes on her back. She turned. Derek Ashford stood 20 feet away, watching her. He looked terrible. The months of legal battles had taken their toll. His face was gaunt, his suit hung loosely on his frame, and there was a wild, unhinged quality to his eyes that hadn't been there before. An ankle monitor bulged beneath his trouser leg. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Derek raised his champagne glass in a mocking toast. Clara turned back to the hedge fund manager without acknowledging him. Her hands were steady, but her heart was pounding. Everything all right? The manager asked. Fine. You were saying about the Singapore deal. She forced herself to focus on the conversation, but she could feel Derek's gaze burning into her back. He was circling her, she realized, moving through the crowd, getting closer, waiting for the right moment. The moment came an hour later. Clara had stepped away from the main crowd to check her phone. Her grandfather had texted, "The announcement is in 30 minutes. Everything is ready." She was typing a response when a voice came from behind her. "Hello, Clara." She turned, slowly. Derek stood 3 feet away, blocking her path to the main hall. Up close, he looked even worse. Bloodshot eyes, trembling hands, the smell of whiskey on his breath. "Derek." "Or should I call you Miss Kensington?" His voice dripped with contempt. "That's what everyone's calling you now, isn't it? The secret heiress. The Cinderella story of New York finance." "I don't have time for this." She tried to step around him, but he moved to block her again. "You destroyed my life," Derek said, his voice cracked. "Everything I built, everything I worked for, gone, because you wanted revenge for a little spilled water. You hit me. You deserved it." His eyes flashed with rage. "You were a nothing, a nobody,
A waitress who couldn't even get a steak order right. And now you're standing here in a designer dress, pretending you belong with these people? Clara felt the old fear rising in her chest, the instinct to shrink, to apologize, to make herself small. She pushed it down. I don't have to pretend anything, Derek. I am these people. She stepped closer to him, refusing to back down. And you're the one who doesn't belong here. You're a fraud, a bully, a man so insecure he had to slap a waitress to feel powerful. Derek's face contorted with fury. You think you've won? You think this is over? I think you're about to violate the terms of your bail by creating a disturbance at a public event. Clara kept her voice calm. I think there are at least 3 security guards watching us right now. And I think if you touch me, you'll be back in a cell before midnight. Derek's hand twitched at his side. For a terrible moment, Clara thought he was going to hit her again, right here in front of 500 witnesses. Then a voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? James, her grandfather's head of security, materialized at Clara's side. He was enormous, intimidating, and his hand rested casually near the weapon concealed under his jacket. Derek's bravado crumbled. He stepped back, nearly stumbling. No problem, he muttered. Just having a conversation with an old friend. The conversation is over, James said. It wasn't a suggestion. Derek looked at Clara one last time. The hatred in his eyes was almost physical. This isn't finished, he said. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline catching up with her. Are you all right, Miss Kensington? James asked. I'm fine. She forced herself to stand straight. Where's my grandfather? In the green room. The announcement is in 15 minutes. Clara nodded and began walking toward the back of the museum. She needed a moment to compose herself, to push Derek's face out of her mind. She didn't see him following her. The green room was empty when Clara entered. Walter had apparently been delayed, probably cornered by some old business rival who wanted to reminisce about deals from 40 years ago. She walked to the mirror and examined her reflection. Her makeup was still perfect, her hair still in place. No visible signs of the confrontation. Good. She could do this. The door opened behind her. Grandfather, She turned and froze. Derek Ashford stood in the doorway, his eyes wild, his chest heaving. He had followed her. He had waited for her to be alone. Security won't let me near the main hall anymore, he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. But nobody's watching back here. Clara's blood turned to ice. Derek, don't do something you'll regret. Regret? He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. What's left to regret? My company is gone. My freedom is gone. My reputation is gone. You took everything from me. You did that to yourself. The embezzlement, the fraud, that was all you. It was business. Derek slammed his fist against the wall. Everyone does it, but you made an example of me. You turned me into a cautionary tale because I hurt your feelings at a dinner party. He started walking toward her. Clara backed up until she hit the dressing table. There was nowhere else to go. Derek, stop. Why? What are you going to do? Call your grandfather? Call your security guard? His voice rose to a shout. I'm already going to prison, Clara. I have nothing left to lose. He lunged at her. Clara grabbed the first thing her hand touched, a heavy glass vase filled with flowers, and swung it at his head. The vase connected with a sickening crack. Derek staggered sideways, blood streaming from a gash above his eye. He crashed into a rack of costumes and went down hard. Clara stood over him, breathing hard, the broken vase still clutched in her hand. The door burst open. James rushed in, weapon drawn, followed by 2 museum security guards. They took in the scene, Derek on the ground, Clara standing over him,
glass and flowers scattered everywhere. "Miss Kensington," James said carefully, "are you hurt?" Clara looked down at her hands. They were covered in water and blood, but none of it was hers. "No," she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant, detached. "I'm fine." Derek groaned on the floor, trying to sit up. One of the security guards pushed him back down and began speaking into a radio. "The police are on their way," James said. "He violated his bail. He'll be remanded immediately." Clara nodded. She set down the broken vase and walked to the mirror again. Her dress was splattered with water. A streak of blood marked her sleeve. She couldn't go out there like this. She couldn't make the announcement covered in evidence of violence. "James," she said quietly, "I need a new dress." Already being arranged. James was on his phone, speaking rapidly. "Your grandfather anticipated something like this. There's a backup in the car." Of course there was. Walter Kensington anticipated everything. Clara turned back to look at Derek. He was being hauled to his feet by security guards, his hands already being cuffed behind his back. He stared at her with pure, undiluted hatred. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll find a way. Derek." Clara's voice was ice. "It's been over for months. You just didn't know it." They dragged him out of the room. Clara stood alone in the wreckage, the scattered flowers, the broken glass, the blood on the carpet. Then she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and went to change her dress. 20 minutes later, Clara Kensington walked onto the stage of the Metropolitan Museum's main hall. She wore a new dress, deep emerald green, hastily retrieved from the car, and her smile showed no trace of what had happened backstage. 500 faces looked up at her expectantly. Walter sat in the front row, his wheelchair positioned at the end of the aisle. He was thinner than he had been 6 months ago, paler, clearly fighting exhaustion. But when his eyes met Clara's, they blazed with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," Clara said, her voice carrying easily through the hall, "thank you for joining us tonight. As many of you know, the Kensington Capital Foundation is dedicated to supporting literacy programs throughout New York City." She spoke for 10 minutes about the foundation's work, about the programs they funded, about the children they helped. It was the speech she had memorized, the safe corporate language that revealed nothing personal. Then she departed from the script. "Many of you know my story," she said. "You've read about it in the papers. The granddaughter of Walter Kensington, who disappeared for 10 years, working as a waitress in Manhattan, only to return when her grandfather became ill." The room was silent, hanging on every word. "What you don't know is why I left." Clara gripped the podium. "I left because I was afraid. Afraid of responsibility. Afraid of expectation. Afraid of becoming someone I didn't choose to be." She looked at her grandfather. "But I've learned something in the last 6 months. You don't become powerful by hiding from the world. You become powerful by standing in it, even when you're terrified. Even when people throw money at your feet and tell you that's where you belong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew what she was referring to. "Tonight, I'm announcing my appointment as Executive Vice President of Kensington Capital. I'll be working alongside my grandfather to continue the legacy our family has built over 4 generations." Clara's voice strengthened. "And I'm announcing a new initiative, the Kensington Workers' Dignity Fund. $100 million dedicated to job training, legal aid, and support services for service industry workers who face harassment and abuse in their workplaces." The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous wave. Clara stood at the podium, letting it wash over her. She saw Margaret Chen on her feet, clapping. She saw board members nodding approvingly. She saw journalists furiously taking notes, and in the front row, she saw Walter Kensington, the dying old man who had waited 10 years for her to come home,
weeping openly with joy. After the speech, the crowd pressed in around Clara. Everyone wanted to shake her hand, to congratulate her, to be seen near the woman of the hour. She smiled and thanked them and said all the right things. But inside, she was thinking about Derek. They had taken him back to jail. His bail had been revoked. His trial would proceed, and he would almost certainly be convicted. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He would spend years in prison. He would lose everything. And Clara couldn't decide how she felt about it. Part of her, the part that remembered kneeling on that marble floor, felt satisfied. Justice had been served. The bully had been defeated. But another part of her, the part that had seen the desperation in Derek's eyes, the madness of a man who had lost everything, felt something closer to pity. He had been cruel. He had been violent. He had tried to destroy her. But in the end, he had mostly destroyed himself. "Clara!" Her grandfather's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned. Walter was being wheeled toward her by James, looking exhausted but happy. "You did well tonight, little bird." "Thank you, grandfather." "The Derek situation. Are you all right?" Clara thought about it. She thought about the vase in her hand, the blood on her dress, the sound it had made when it connected with his skull. "I'm fine," she said. Walter studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Good, because there's one more thing we need to discuss." He gestured to James, who handed Clara a sealed envelope. "This arrived this morning. I wanted to wait until after your announcement to show you." Clara opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a letter from Megan Torres. "Dear Clara," it read, "I know we have history, and not the good kind, but I have information you need to see. Derek wasn't working alone. The embezzlement, the fraud, there was someone above him, someone who's still free, someone who's planning to destroy Kensington Capital from the inside. Meet me tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. Megan." Clara looked up from the letter. Her grandfather was watching her with knowing eyes. "Do you believe her?" Clara asked. "Megan Torres is a survivor. She'll say anything to protect herself." Walter paused. "But she's also smart enough not to make enemies of us without good reason." Clara read the letter again. Someone above Derek. Someone still free. Someone planning to destroy them from the inside. The night suddenly felt colder. "What do we do?" she asked. Walter smiled, that familiar, dangerous smile that had made him a legend in business. "We do what Kensingtons always do," he said. "We hunt." Clara met Megan Torres the next morning at a coffee shop in Soho, far from the usual haunts of Manhattan's business elite. She arrived early, choosing a table in the back corner where she could see the door. Megan walked in at exactly 10 o'clock. She looked different from the last time Clara had seen her. Thinner, harder, with dark circles under her eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't hide. The confident hostess who had tormented Clara for 3 years was gone. In her place was a woman who kept glancing over her shoulder. "You came alone," Megan said, sliding into the seat across from Clara. "I wasn't sure you would." "You said you had information. I'm listening." Megan wrapped her hands around the coffee cup a waitress had already placed in front of her. Her fingers were trembling. "I need protection first. A guarantee that whatever I tell you, you won't turn it over to the police." "That depends on what you tell me." "Clara," Megan leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm not playing games. The people involved in this, they're dangerous. If they find out I'm talking to you, I'm dead." Clara studied the woman's face. She had spent 3 years being bullied by Megan Torres, 3 years of being sabotaged and humiliated and made to feel worthless. Part of her wanted to walk away, to let Megan deal with whatever mess she had gotten herself into. But another part of her, the part that had learned to read people, to see beneath surfaces, recognized genuine terror when she saw it. "Tell me what you know," Clara said. "Then we'll talk about protection." Megan took a shaky breath. Derek wasn't the mastermind. He thought he was. God, his ego was so big he couldn't imagine anyone being smarter than him. But he was just a puppet. A puppet for whom? Her name is Victoria Crane. She runs a private equity firm called Crane Acquisitions. On paper, she's a legitimate businesswoman. Old money, Harvard MBA, sits on half the charity boards in Manhattan. Megan's voice dropped even lower. But that's just the surface. Underneath, she's a predator. She finds companies that are struggling, infiltrates their leadership, and strips them for parts. She's done it dozens of times. Derek's company was supposed to be her biggest score yet. Clara's mind was racing. She had heard of Victoria Crane. Everyone in finance had. The woman was a legend, known for her surgical precision in hostile takeovers. What does this have to do with Kensington Capital? Megan looked at her with something like pity. Clara, she's already inside your company. Clara's blood went cold. What? Derek was just phase 1. He was supposed to fail. Victoria set him up to get caught, fed him the embezzlement scheme, encouraged his recklessness, waited for him to self-destruct. Megan shook her head. What she really wanted was the chaos, the distraction. While everyone was focused on Derek's downfall, she was positioning her people inside Kensington Capital. That's impossible. My grandfather vets everyone personally. Your grandfather is dying, Clara. He's not as sharp as he used to be. He missed things. Megan reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. This has everything. Names, transactions, communications. Victoria's been planning this for 2 years. By the time Derek went to prison, she already had 3 of her people on your board. Clara stared at the flash drive. Her hands wanted to reach for it, but her mind was screaming warnings. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "You worked for Derek. You helped him. Why turn on Victoria now?" Megan's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Because she killed him. Clara froze. What? Derek, last night. They're calling it suicide. Said he hung himself in his cell. Megan's voice broke. But I know Victoria. She doesn't leave loose ends. Derek knew too much. He was going to trial, and there was a chance he might talk. She wiped her eyes furiously. I loved him. I know that sounds insane after everything, but I did. And now he's dead because I introduced them. I brought Victoria into his life. Clara sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. Derek Ashford was dead. The man who had thrown money at her feet, who had slapped her in a hallway, who had tried to attack her at the gala. Dead. She should feel something. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. Instead, she felt nothing but cold dread. If Victoria killed Derek to keep him quiet, Clara said slowly, then she'll come for you, too. I know. That's why I need your help. Megan pushed the flash drive across the table. Take this. Use it. Destroy her before she destroys everything. And in exchange, get me out of the country. New identity, new life. Somewhere she can't find me. Clara picked up the flash drive. It was small, innocuous. Just a piece of plastic and metal, but it felt heavy in her hand. I need to verify this information first. Then verify it fast. Megan stood up, pulling on her coat. Because if Victoria finds out I'm talking to you, We'll both be dead before the week is over." She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Clara sat alone, holding the flash drive, wondering what she had just stepped into. She took the drive straight to her grandfather. Walter was in his study, hooked up to an oxygen tank that he hadn't needed a month ago. His decline had accelerated rapidly in recent weeks, as if his body had finally decided to stop fighting. But his mind was still sharp. "Victoria Crane," he said after Clara finished explaining. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I should have known." "You know her?" "I knew her father, Richard Crane. We were rivals 40 years ago. He tried to destroy me twice and failed both times." Walter closed his eyes. "Victoria was always smarter than her father, more patient. I should have been watching her. Megan says she has people on our board. Then we need to find out who." Walter opened his eyes. "Give me the drive. I'll have our security team analyze it." "Grandfather, if this is real, if Victoria really has infiltrated the company, we can't trust anyone." "We can trust James, and we can trust Eleanor Park." Eleanor Park was Kensington Capital's chief legal officer, a 60-year-old woman who had worked for the family for 3 decades. Clara had met her several times over the past months. She was sharp, fierce, and completely loyal to Walter. "Are you sure about Eleanor?" "I'm sure about nothing anymore." Walter's hand trembled as he reached for the drive. "But Eleanor has been with me since before Victoria Crane learned to read a balance sheet. If I can't trust her, then we've already lost." Clara handed over the flash drive. "There's something else," she said. "Derek Ashford is dead. They're saying suicide, but Megan believes Victoria had him killed." Walter was silent for a long moment. His face showed no emotion, but Clara could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. "Then Victoria is cleaning house," he finally said. "She's preparing for something. Something big." "What do we do?" Walter looked at his granddaughter. In his eyes, Clara saw fear for the first time since she had returned. "We move faster than she does," he said, "and we pray we're not already too late." Eleanor Park arrived within the hour. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of presence that made people twice her size step back. Clara had always found her intimidating, but today she was grateful for that intimidation. "I've reviewed the drive," Eleanor said, spreading documents across Walter's desk. "Megan Torres wasn't lying. Victoria Crane has been positioning assets inside Kensington Capital for at least 18 months. "Who?" Clara demanded. Eleanor pointed to 3 names on an org chart. "Robert Hayes, our new CFO, brought in 8 months ago to modernize our financial systems. His previous employer was a shell company owned by Crane Acquisitions." Clara felt sick. She had worked with Robert Hayes. She had trusted him. "Who else?" "David Chen, head of our Asian operations, and Sandra Wells, director of investor relations." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "All 3 were hired within the last year. All 3 have connections to Victoria Crane that were hidden behind layers of corporate camouflage." "How did we miss this?" Clara asked. "Because we weren't looking for it." Eleanor turned to Walter. "Sir, with your health declining, they've been operating with minimal oversight. Hayes has been quietly restructuring our debt obligations. Chen has been undervaluing our Asian assets. Wells has been feeding information to outside investors." "They're preparing for a hostile takeover," Walter said. "Worse, they're preparing for a hostile takeover that looks like a rescue." Eleanor pulled out another document. "Victoria's plan is elegant, I'll give her that. She's been spreading rumors about Kensington Capital's instability. Our stock has dropped 12% in the last 2 months. When it drops another 10%, she'll make a public offer to save the company. The board, half of which she already controls through proxies and paid allies, will vote to accept. And she'll own everything, Clara whispered. Everything your family has built over 4 generations. Eleanor's voice was grim. She's been planning this for years. The Derek situation, your return, even your grandfather's illness. She's been adapting her strategy to account for every variable. Clara turned to her grandfather. What do we do? Fire the 3 plants? If we fire them now, Victoria will know we're onto her. She'll accelerate her timeline. Walter shook his head slowly. No. We need to use them. Feed them false information. Make Victoria think her plan is working while we prepare our counterstrike. What kind of counterstrike? Walter smiled. It was the smile Clara remembered from her childhood. The smile of a man who had built an empire by being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Victoria wants to play a long game, but she forgot one thing. He looked at Clara. Kensingtons don't play long games. We play winning games. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of Clara's life. During the day, she went to work at Kensington Capital, smiling at Robert Hayes, making small talk with David Chen, pretending everything was normal. At night, she met with Eleanor and James and a small team of trusted allies, building their case against Victoria Crane. The flash drive Megan had provided was a goldmine. It contained emails, financial records, recorded phone conversations. Victoria had been careful, but not careful enough. She had left digital fingerprints everywhere.
We have enough to go to the SEC, Eleanor said during one of their late-night meetings. Fraud, market manipulation, conspiracy to commit hostile takeover through illegal means. Victoria would face criminal charges. That's not enough, Clara said. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Criminal prosecution isn't enough? Victoria has armies of lawyers. She'll tie up the case for years, and even if she's eventually convicted, the damage will be done. Kensington Capital will be gutted. Clara shook her head. I want to destroy her. Completely. I want her to lose everything the way she planned for us to lose everything. Eleanor exchanged a glance with James. Neither of them spoke. There might be a way, James said finally. But it's risky. Tell me. Victoria's strength is her network. She has allies on a dozen boards, investors who owe her favors, journalists who write puff pieces about her. James pulled out a folder. But networks can be turned. If we can show her allies that she's not as powerful as she seems, that she's vulnerable, they'll abandon her faster than rats leaving the sinking ship. How do we show that? We beat her at her own game. James laid out photographs on the table. Victoria is planning to make her move at the Kensington Capital annual shareholder meeting next month. She's going to have her proxies propose a vote of no confidence in current leadership. The board will be forced to accept her buyout offer. So we stop the vote. We do more than stop it. James smiled grimly. We turn it into her public execution. The plan was audacious, risky, and probably illegal in at least 3 ways. Clara loved it. They would let Victoria think her scheme was working. They would let her plants continue feeding her false information. They would let her believe that Walter was too sick to fight and Clara was too inexperienced to see the trap closing around her. Then, at the shareholder meeting, they would spring their own trap. We'll need evidence that can't be disputed, Eleanor said. Documentation, witnesses, a clear chain of custody. If there's any doubt, the board will side with Victoria, just to avoid the mess. We have Megan Torres, Clara said. Megan is a hostile witness with a personal vendetta. Victoria's lawyers will tear her apart. Then we need someone else, someone Victoria trusts, someone who can testify to her plans from the inside. The room fell silent. There might be someone, James said slowly, but you're not going to like it. Who?
James hesitated. Robert Hayes. Clara stared at him. Robert Hayes is Victoria's man. He's been sabotaging us for months. He's also scared. James pulled up a file on his laptop. I've been monitoring his communications. In the last 2 weeks, he's made several encrypted calls to an attorney who specializes in whistleblower cases. He's also moved most of his personal assets offshore. He's planning to run. He's planning to protect himself, which means he knows Victoria's operation is more dangerous than he signed up for. James closed the laptop. If we can get to him before he runs, offer him immunity in exchange for testimony, he could bring down Victoria's entire network. Clara thought about Robert Hayes. She had shaken his hand at board meetings. She had trusted his financial reports. And the whole time he had been working to destroy her family. Do it, she said. Make contact. Find out what he wants. James nodded and left the room. Eleanor gathered her documents, preparing to leave as well. But she paused at the door. Clara? Yes? Your grandfather would be proud of you. The way you've handled this, the strategic thinking, the patience, the willingness to play the long game. Eleanor's voice softened. You're a true Kensington. Clara didn't know how to respond to that, so she just nodded. After Eleanor left, Clara sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by documents and photographs and evidence of corporate warfare. She thought about the girl she had been a year ago, the waitress who kept her head down, the runaway who thought she could escape her family name. That girl was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder, more calculating. Someone who could smile at enemies and plan their destruction. Someone who could look at a man like Robert Hayes and see not a person, but a piece on a chessboard. She wondered if that was a good thing. Her phone buzzed, a text from her grandfather. Come home. We need to talk. Clara gathered her things and headed for the door. She found Walter in his bedroom, hooked up to more machines than she could count. His nurse had left for the night, and James stood guard outside the door. Sit down, little bird, Walter said. His voice was weaker than it had been even that morning. Clara pulled a chair close to his bed. What's wrong? The doctors were here today. They've revised their estimate. Walter's eyes met hers. I have weeks, not months, maybe days. Clara felt the world tilt beneath her. No, that can't be right. You were fine this morning. I wasn't fine. I haven't been fine in a long time. Walter reached out and took her hand. His grip was barely stronger than a child's. I've been holding on through sheer stubbornness because I needed to see this through. I needed to make sure you were ready. Ready for what? To lead, to fight, to be a Kensington. Walter's eyes shimmered with tears he refused to let fall. When I'm gone, Clara, you'll be alone. Victoria will sense weakness and attack immediately. The board will question your leadership. Enemies will come out of the woodwork. I can't do this without you. You can. You must. Walter squeezed her hand. Everything I've taught you, everything you've learned in the last year, it's been preparation for this moment. You're not the girl who ran away anymore. You're a warrior. Clara felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. I'm scared, she whispered. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Walter pulled her closer. But don't let it stop you. Promise me, Clara. Promise me you'll see this through. Promise me you'll destroy Victoria Crane and protect everything we've built. Clara looked at her grandfather, this dying old man who had waited 10 years for her to come home, who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. I promise, she said. Walter smiled. It was a peaceful smile, the smile of a man who had finally finished his life's work. Good, he said. "Now let me rest. We have a war to win, and I need my strength." Clara kissed his forehead and left the room. Outside in the hallway, she leaned against the wall and sobbed. 3 days later, Walter Kensington died in his sleep. The funeral was the largest New York had seen in decades. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, they all came to pay their respects to the man who had shaped the city's financial landscape for half a century. Clara stood at the front of the church, dry-eyed, accepting condolences with a steady voice and a calm face. Inside, she was screaming. But she didn't let anyone see that. Victoria Crane attended the funeral. She approached Clara after the service, her face a mask of sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Victoria said, taking Clara's hand in both of hers. "Your grandfather was a great man. The business world will miss him." "Thank you," Clara said. Her voice betrayed nothing. "If there's anything I can do, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." Victoria's eyes searched Clara's face, looking for weakness. "These transitions can be so difficult. I'd hate to see your grandfather's legacy suffer because of inexperienced leadership." Clara met Victoria's gaze. She saw the predator lurking behind the sympathetic smile. She saw the calculations happening behind those cold eyes. "I appreciate your concern," Clara said, "but I think we'll manage just fine." Victoria's smile flickered for just a moment. Then she nodded and walked away. Clara watched her go, feeling the weight of her grandfather's promise settling onto her shoulders. The shareholder meeting was in 3 weeks. The war was about to begin. The morning of the shareholder meeting, Clara woke at 4 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through the plan for the 100th time. Every contingency, every possible response, every way Victoria might try to counter their attack. Her grandfather had taught her to prepare for everything, and she had. But preparation couldn't silence the fear. At 6, she gave up on rest and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Her hands were steady as she measured the grounds, but her heart was racing. In 8 hours, she would either save her family's legacy or lose everything her grandfather had spent his life building. There was no middle ground. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from James. "Hayes confirmed. He'll testify. Package is ready." Clara exhaled slowly. Robert Hayes had agreed to cooperate 3 days after Walter's funeral. It had taken a combination of threats and promises: immunity from prosecution, protection from Victoria's retaliation, a new identity if he wanted one. In the end, fear had won. Hayes knew what Victoria did to people who outlived their usefulness. He didn't want to end up like Derek Ashford. A second text came through, this one from Eleanor. "Security sweep complete. No listening devices found. We're clean." They had been checking for surveillance equipment every day for the past 2 weeks. Victoria had eyes everywhere, and they couldn't afford any leaks. Not today. Clara finished her coffee and went to get dressed. She chose a black suit, her grandfather's favorite color. Simple, elegant, powerful. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the waitress who had knelt on a restaurant floor picking up scattered bills. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone Victoria Crane had never seen coming. The Kensington Capital headquarters occupied the top 15 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. Clara arrived at 9 o'clock, 2 hours before the shareholder meeting was scheduled to begin. The building was already buzzing with activity. Security personnel, legal teams, communications staff, all preparing for what everyone sensed would be a pivotal moment in the company's history. Most of them didn't know the half of it. Eleanor met her in the executive elevator. "Victoria arrived 20 minutes ago. She's in the small conference room on 45, meeting with her board allies." How many? 5 confirmed votes in her pocket. David Chen, Sandra Wells, and 3 outside directors she's been cultivating for months. Eleanor's jaw tightened. That's 5 out of 12. She needs 7 for a majority. She thinks she has them. She thinks Robert Hayes is still on her side? She doesn't know he's been feeding us her playbook for the last 3 weeks. Clara nodded. According to Hayes, Victoria's plan was straightforward. Introduce a motion of no confidence in Clara's leadership. Cite the company's declining stock price and instability following Walter's death. Then propose an immediate buyout at a premium that would make the remaining board members rich. It was a clean, surgical strike. What Victoria didn't know was that Clara had been preparing a strike of her own. "Is Hayes ready?" Clara asked. Nervous, but committed. He knows there's no going back. Eleanor handed Clara a thick folder. "Here's the final evidence package. Emails, financial records, witness statements. Everything we need to prove Victoria orchestrated the Ashford fraud, manipulated our stock price, and infiltrated our leadership." Clara took the folder. It felt heavier than it should. "And Megan?" "In a safe house in Connecticut. She'll testify by video link if needed, but Hayes should be enough." Eleanor paused. "Clara, are you sure about this?" "Once we start, we can't stop. Victoria will fight back with everything she has." "I'm sure." Clara met Eleanor's eyes. "My grandfather spent his last months preparing me for this moment. I'm not going to waste it." The elevator doors opened. Clara stepped out onto the executive floor, ready for war. The shareholder meeting was held in the main conference room on the 47th floor. By 11 o'clock, every seat was filled. Board members, major investors, legal representatives, journalists who had somehow obtained credentials. The air crackled with tension. Clara sat at the head of the table, in the chair her grandfather had occupied for 40 years. Victoria Crane sat across from her, flanked by David Chen and Sandra Wells. Their eyes met briefly, and Victoria smiled, a confident, predatory smile that said she had already won. Clara smiled back. "Ladies and gentlemen," the board secretary announced, "this emergency meeting of Kensington Capital shareholders is now in session. The first item on the agenda is a motion introduced by Director Chen." David Chen cleared his throat and stood. He was a small man with nervous hands, and Clara noticed he wouldn't meet her eyes. "Thank you," Chen said. "In light of recent instability in company leadership and the unfortunate decline in shareholder value, I move that we hold a vote of no confidence in Clara Kensington's position as Executive Vice President and Acting CEO." A murmur rippled through the room. "Furthermore," Chen continued, reading from prepared notes, "I move that we accept the generous acquisition offer from Crane Acquisitions, which would provide immediate value to shareholders and ensure the company's long-term stability under experienced leadership." He sat down quickly, as if relieved to have finished his part. Victoria leaned forward. "I want to be clear that this is not a hostile action. I have nothing but respect for the Kensington legacy. But the facts are undeniable. Since Walter Kensington's death, the company has lost 12% of its value. Investors are nervous. Partners are asking questions." She turned to face the board members, her voice smooth and reasonable. "Clara Kensington is a talented young woman, but she lacks the experience to lead a company of this magnitude. She was a waitress 6 months ago. With all due respect, the transition has been too fast, too disruptive." Victoria spread her hands. "My offer provides a graceful exit. Shareholders receive a 20% premium on current stock prices. Clara receives a generous severance package, and the company continues to thrive under new leadership." Several board members were nodding. Clara saw the calculation in their eyes. They were weighing the premium against their loyalty, and the premium was winning. This was the moment. "May I respond?" Clara asked, her voice calm. "Of course," the board secretary said. "The floor recognizes Clara Kensington." Clara stood slowly. She looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. Some looked away. Others held her gaze with curiosity or skepticism. "Victoria Crane has presented a compelling case," Clara began. "She's right that the company has faced challenges since my grandfather's death. She's right that I lack traditional executive experience. And she's right that her offer provides short-term value to shareholders." Victoria's smile widened slightly. She thought Clara was conceding. "What she hasn't told you," Clara continued, "is why the company has faced those challenges. What she hasn't told you is how our stock price came to decline so dramatically. And what she certainly hasn't told you is her own role in orchestrating the very instability she now proposes to rescue us from." The smile froze on Victoria's face. Clara opened the folder Eleanor had given her. 18 months ago, Victoria Crane began placing operatives inside Kensington Capital. Robert Hayes, our current CFO. David Chen, our head of Asian operations. Sandra Wells, our director of investor relations. Clara looked at each of them in turn. All three were hired through shell companies, ultimately controlled by Crane Acquisitions. All three have been working to undermine this company from within. "This is absurd," Victoria said, but her voice had lost its smoothness. "These are respected professionals with impeccable credentials. Their credentials are fabricated. Their previous employers don't exist." Clara pulled documents from the folder and began passing them around the table. "These are the real records. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, hidden connections to Crane Acquisitions. Everything traces back to you, Victoria." David Chen had gone pale. Sandra Wells was gripping the edge of the table. "But that's not all," Clara continued. "The decline in our stock price wasn't accidental. It was manufactured. For the past 6 months, Victoria has been spreading false rumors about our financial instability through carefully placed sources in the financial press. She's been shorting our stock through proxies, profiting from the very decline she engineered." Clara pulled out another stack of documents. "Here are the trading records. Here are the communications between Victoria and her proxies. Here is the proof of market manipulation." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "You're making wild accusations without any—" "I'm not finished." Clara's voice cut through the room like a blade. Victoria fell silent. "Derek Ashford. You all remember the scandal. A tech CEO caught embezzling from his own company, publicly humiliated, arrested, imprisoned." Clara paused, and then found dead in his cell, officially ruled a suicide. The room had gone completely still. Derek Ashford was Victoria's puppet. She recruited him years ago, set up the embezzlement scheme, and used him to create chaos in the New York business community. When he became a liability, when there was a risk he might talk about his connection to her, she had him killed. "That is a monstrous lie." Victoria was on her feet now, her face twisted with rage. "You have no proof of any—" "Actually, she does." Every head turned toward the door. Robert Hayes stood in the entrance, flanked by James and 2 federal marshals. "I have proof," Hayes said. His voice was shaking, but his words were clear. "I have recordings of Victoria ordering me to sabotage Kensington's financial systems. I have emails detailing her plans to manipulate the stock price. And I have a recorded conversation where she discussed—" his voice caught. "Where she discussed eliminating Derek Ashford as a loose end." Victoria's face drained of color. "Robert," her voice was barely above a whisper, "what have you done?" "What I should have done months ago." Hayes walked into the room, his hands trembling. "I was scared of you, Victoria. We all were. You made us think you were untouchable. But you're not. He looked at Clara. She showed me that. One of the federal marshals stepped forward. Victoria Crane, you are under arrest for securities fraud, market manipulation, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. This is a setup, Victoria screamed. You can't do this. I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll destroy all of you. The marshals grabbed her arms. She struggled, but they were stronger. Get your hands off me! Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can do? Clara walked around the table until she stood directly in front of Victoria. I know exactly who you are, Clara said quietly. You're a predator who thought you could pick off the weak and vulnerable. You thought I was easy prey, a waitress, a nobody, a girl playing dress-up in her grandfather's company. She leaned closer. You were wrong. Victoria's eyes blazed with hatred. This isn't over. I'll get out of this. I always do. And when I do, I'll come for you. I'll destroy everything you love. Clara didn't flinch. No, you won't. Because by the time you get out, if you ever get out, there won't be anything left of your empire. I'm going to dismantle Crane Acquisitions piece by piece. I'm going to expose every dirty deal, every hidden partnership, every person who ever helped you hurt innocent people. She straightened up. My grandfather taught me that power isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something they can never tear down. Clara stepped back. Take her away. The marshals dragged Victoria toward the door. She was still screaming threats and promises of revenge, but her voice faded as they pulled her into the hallway. The conference room was silent. Clara turned back to the board. The motion of no confidence has been rendered moot, she said calmly. Unless anyone objects, I move that we table the acquisition proposal permanently and proceed with normal business operations under current leadership. No one objected. Then this meeting is adjourned. The aftermath unfolded over the following months like a slow-motion avalanche. Victoria Crane's arrest made national headlines. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Fraud, market manipulation, conspiracy to commit murder. Her lawyers fought every charge, but the recordings Robert Hayes had provided were irrefutable. When the full scope of her crimes became public, her allies abandoned her faster than Clara had predicted. Crane Acquisitions collapsed within weeks. Investors fled. Partners severed ties. The company that Victoria had spent 20 years building was dismantled and sold off for pennies on the dollar. David Chen and Sandra Wells were arrested as co-conspirators. They both eventually plea bargained for reduced sentences in exchange for testimony against Victoria. Their cooperation added even more evidence to an already airtight case. Robert Hayes received immunity as promised. He testified at Victoria's trial, detailing every aspect of the conspiracy in devastating detail. When it was over, he disappeared into witness protection with a new name and a new life, somewhere far from New York. Megan Torres never had to testify. The evidence was strong enough without her. Clara arranged for her to receive a modest settlement and a fresh start in California, far from the world of New York finance. They never spoke again, but Clara sometimes wondered if Megan had found peace. The trial lasted 4 months. Victoria Crane was convicted on all counts: securities fraud, market manipulation, conspiracy to commit murder. The judge sentenced her to 45 years in federal prison. Clara attended the sentencing hearing. She sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as the woman who had tried to destroy her family was led away in chains. Victoria's eyes found Clara's across the crowded room. There was no rage in them anymore, just emptiness. Clara felt nothing. 1 year after the shareholder meeting, Kensington Capital held its annual gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the same venue where Derek Ashford had attacked her, the same venue where she had first announced her role in the company. Clara had chosen it deliberately,
A reminder that the places where we fall can become the places where we rise. She stood at the podium, looking out at 500 faces. Business leaders, politicians, philanthropists, journalists. A year ago, these people had whispered about her inexperience, her sudden appearance, her unlikely transformation from waitress to executive. Now they hung on her every word. "When I returned to New York 2 years ago," Clara said, "I was running from my past. I had convinced myself that the only way to be free was to be invisible, to be small, to be forgotten." She paused, letting the words settle. "My grandfather taught me that I was wrong. He taught me that freedom isn't about hiding from who you are. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be." Clara looked at the front row, where Eleanor Park sat beside James and the other people who had helped her survive the worst year of her life. "Tonight, I'm announcing the official launch of the Kensington Foundation's Workers' Dignity Initiative. Over the next 5 years, we will invest $500 million in programs that support, train, and protect workers in service industries across America." Applause erupted through the hall. "Because I remember what it felt like to be invisible," Clara continued when the noise died down. "I remember what it felt like to have money thrown at my feet and be told that was where I belonged. And I remember the people who were kind to me when I had nothing, the coworkers who shared their tips, the customers who treated me like a human being, the strangers who saw me when everyone else looked through me." Her voice strengthened. "Those people deserve champions. They deserve someone who will fight for their dignity, their rights, their futures. And as long as I'm standing here, that's exactly what I intend to do." The applause was thunderous this time. Clara let it wash over her, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. After the speech, she slipped away from the crowd and found a quiet corner near the museum's main entrance. She needed a moment to breathe, to process, to remember. A familiar voice interrupted her solitude. "You know, I almost didn't recognize you." Clara turned. A young woman stood a few feet away, wearing a server's uniform and holding a tray of empty champagne glasses. She was maybe 22, with tired eyes and the careful posture of someone who had learned to make herself invisible. "I'm sorry?" Clara said. "I was at Aurelius, that night." The young woman's voice was barely above a whisper. "I was the one who recorded the video, the one that got sent to the police." Clara stared at her. She had never known who had made that recording, the video that had started Derek Ashford's downfall. "Why?" Clara asked. The young woman shrugged. "Because I've been that girl, the one getting yelled at, the one getting things thrown at her. And I was tired of watching people like him get away with it." She smiled slightly. "I didn't know who you were then. None of us did. We just knew you didn't deserve what he did to you." Clara felt tears prick her eyes for the first time in months. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea how much that meant, how much it changed everything." "I think I do now." The young woman glanced toward the ballroom. "You changed things for all of us. The foundation, the programs. My sister just got accepted into one of your job training initiatives. She's going to be a paralegal." Clara didn't know what to say. She had spent so much time thinking about the big picture, the corporate battles, the legal strategies, the billion-dollar foundations, that she had almost forgotten what it was really about. People. Individual people. Their small hopes and quiet dreams. "What's your name?" Clara asked. "Maria." Clara reached into her clutch and pulled out a business card. "Maria, if you ever want to do something other than catering, call me. We have positions opening up in our community outreach program. I think you'd be perfect." Maria took the card like it was made of gold. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Clara smiled. "The world needs more people who are willing to stand up, even when it's scary, even when no one's watching."
Maria looked at the card, then back at Clara. Her eyes were shining. "Thank you, Miss Kensington." "Call me Clara." Maria nodded, clutching the card to her chest, and disappeared back into the crowd. Clara watched her go, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Later that night, after the gala had ended and the guests had departed, Clara stood alone in the empty museum hall. The caterers were packing up. The lights were dimming. Tomorrow, this space would return to its normal function, a temple of art and history, visited by tourists and schoolchildren and people seeking beauty. But tonight, it belonged to her. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo album she kept locked behind a password. Pictures of her grandfather, pictures of her parents from before the accident, pictures of the tiny Brooklyn apartment where she had hidden for 10 years, convinced that anonymity was the same thing as safety. She swiped to the last photo, a picture someone had taken at the shareholder meeting, the moment after Victoria Crane had been led away. Clara stood at the head of the table, surrounded by board members, her face calm and composed. But her eyes were blazing. That was the woman she had become, not the frightened waitress, not the runaway heiress, not even the grieving granddaughter. She was Clara Kensington, CEO of one of the most powerful investment firms in America, founder of a foundation that would help thousands of workers rebuild their lives, survivor of every person who had ever tried to break her. She closed the phone and looked up at the museum's vaulted ceiling. "I did it, grandfather," she whispered. "I kept my promise." The silence answered her, but somehow she felt like he was listening. 3 days later, Clara visited her grandfather's grave for the first time since the funeral. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful, far from the noise and chaos of Manhattan. She had chosen this spot herself, a hillside overlooking the Hudson River, where Walter could watch the boats go by for eternity. She knelt beside the headstone and placed a single white lily on the grass. "I brought you something," she said softly, pulling a newspaper from her bag. "The Wall Street Journal, front page. Kensington Capital reports record profits under new leadership." She laughed quietly. "Remember when you said I'd never make the front page unless I married someone famous? I guess I proved you wrong." The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere, a bird was singing. "I miss you," Clara continued. "Every day. There are so many times I want to pick up the phone and ask your advice, and then I remember you're not there." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "But I hear your voice in my head, telling me to be strong, telling me to be brave, telling me that Kensingtons don't run from fights, we win them." She touched the cold stone of the headstone. "Victoria's in prison. Her company is gone. The people she hurt are getting justice." Clara took a deep breath. "And I'm okay, grandfather. I'm really okay. For the first time since Mom and Dad died, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She stood up, brushing grass from her knees. "I have to go now. Board meeting in an hour. We're voting on the Asia expansion you always wanted." She smiled through her tears. "I'll make sure it passes. You know I will." She kissed her fingers and pressed them to the headstone. "I love you. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for waiting." Then Clara Kensington turned and walked back to her car, back to her life, back to the future her grandfather had given her the courage to claim. Behind her, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the hillside. And somewhere, maybe, an old lion smiled. The world has a way of testing the people it wounds the most. It throws money at their feet and tells them to kneel. It puts them in uniforms and makes them invisible. It finds their deepest fears and whispers that they will never be enough. But the world forgets something important. The people it wounds the hardest are often the ones who rise the highest. Clara Mitchell was a waitress. Clara Kensington was a warrior. And in the end, she was both. A woman who had been broken and remade, who had been humiliated and had emerged victorious, who had been told she was nothing and had proven she was everything. Derek Ashford threw cash at her feet and told her she knew her place. Her place was at the head of the table. Her place was in the boardroom where empires were built. Her place was standing tall, while the people who tried to destroy her crumbled to dust. Some people are born into power. Clara Kensington earned hers, and that made all the difference.